Okay. Welcome to the Serious Scorpio podcast. I'm your host, Naomi Simpson, and joining me today is Colleen Williams. I will let Colleen do an intro, a little bio to tell us all about her. And so the video today, we're sitting in Colleen's beautiful backyard to be safely socially distanced for this interview. And we're on full lockdown again here in Ontario. So this is as good as it gets. So I'm not going to be in the YouTube video. We're keeping the camera focused solely on our guest. And Colleen has kindly agreed to explore the themes of the show with me. So without further ado, Colleen, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, I'm Colleen. I am an actor, director, mother, grandmother, former teacher, crazy person. I know Naomi through our book club and through a play reading series which we have done together, and I enjoy her company, and I'm looking forward to exploring this topic.
Me too. Thank you. And yes, I always think back to I think I joined the book club about 10 years or so ago, and the book club in Beaton is uber exclusive. I think I was on the waiting list for about almost another 10 years before I actually got to it. But I'm so grateful that our connection morphed from, sitting around a table discussing books with people who are friendly acquaintances. And of course, over the years I've been in it, have become closer friends. And then we did the play reading, which was such a wonderful experience for me, and getting to know you better and becoming friends through that. So I'm very grateful for that connection.
Thank you. Me too.
So one of the things, the main theme I really want to explore through this podcast is the concept of living authentically, living in integrity, and what it means for you to be true to you. So tell me what your thoughts are on that. What does it mean to be true to yourself?
Well, my thought is that, and I think we've perhaps touched on this before, that being true to ourselves means recognizing what we were originally in our childhood, what made us happy, who our essential selves were, and trying to maintain the heart of that throughout our lives, which is a difficult task because when we stray from that, we run into deep water sometimes and have to find our way back out. But if we continually through our lives work toward that and are aware that we need to work toward that, then we find ourselves recognizing what is important in life and having good relationships.
I love that. I love that idea of looking back to who you were as a child, because I think that is such a powerful clue as to who we are. And as a coach, that's something that's a tool that I use often when people come to me and they're stuck and they're looking, to make changes in life or whatever. I often do consultations with clients and they don't feel fulfilled in their job or relationships or whatever it might be. And one of the things we often talk about is, what did you do as a child that just allowed time to stand still, or that you came back to again and again and really made your heart sing? And so that's what you're speaking about?
Absolutely. As a child, I was extremely bookish, extremely introverted. I love art, theater, storytelling, trying to understand the world in a spiritual and practical way through stories. Mm-hmm. And that's what stuck with me through all these years. And I sometimes had the opportunities to be very close to that essential self. Other times, other things in the world interfered, and I interfered with an ability to stay close to that. As one goes beyond childhood and gets into teenage years, and I was a very sheltered child. Mm-hmm. Trying to explore the rest of the world can be full of pitfalls, and we find ourselves sometimes in situations which are doing ourselves harm or doing other people harm around us, and we have to find ways of coming out of that and still having integrity and moving onward. In my case, in my late teens, I did not know how to cope with the world socially or otherwise, and I found myself in some situations which were very difficult. I ended up marrying a very kind and intelligent man whom I sort of saw as my savior, which is, not necessarily healthy, but in some ways was very good. And I have my son, and I've maintained a wonderful relationship with my son over the years. That was part of what I treasured during a time that I wasn't necessarily being my real self,
Right.
but I had something to hold on to. During that time, when I was first married, I found my happiness by directing kids, directing adults, directing teenagers, and acting myself.
Mhm.
And I coached cheerleading, which sounds hilarious to
Oh,
people.
wow.
But we had a fabulous team in a little school that I taught at,
Mhm.
which won the Eastern Ontario Championships
Oh, wow.
3 years in a row, different, like first, second, or third. So I really felt a sense of accomplishment in using that part of myself that could share with others this wonderful exploration of spirit and
Mhm.
storytelling. So that was how I dealt with things then. And eventually, things got muckier again. So you have a question about that, I'm sure.
As they always do, right?
Yeah.
That's life is mucky. That's for sure.
Yeah.
So in that time, it sounds like you were sort of overall detouring away from your authentic self, but found ways to come back to it through your connection with
Yes.
your son and through the work that you were doing in terms of like your creative expression with theater for kids and with the cheerleading.
Yes. And it's hard to recognize that that's actually what's happening when you're in that time period. But when you stand back and look at, as I can now,
Mhm.
over the course of time, then I can see certain things that worked in certain ways and certain decisions I made that were useful to me in staying true to myself. Others were not.
Right.
But eventually I ended that marriage,
Mhm.
and that was sad and horrible and difficult.
Mhm.
But I still, it's interesting. I seem to want to hold on to the things that are good because my ex and I are still friends to this day.
Right.
And, over a period of time, and I, care about what happens with him. He cares about what happens with me. So I've been able to kind of maintain some kind of positive overall look at what that period of time meant. That's important to me.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
and I think we all want to be loved, and if we create a situation in which we're definitely not loved, then it can be extremely difficult. But I work at trying to maintain relationships. I don't like to lose relationships. It's interesting.
Yeah, well, and I think what you're describing is maintaining a relationship. I mean, that's extremely challenging because the relationship obviously changed enormously.
Yes.
But you've been able to navigate that change and still maintain a loving connection.
Yes.
Even though the loving connection is not the same as what it was
Absolutely,
originally.
yeah. And that might not work for everybody, and I don't suggest that it does. But in my case, it's really important to me to have to be able to put some reason on why things happen the way they, and look at my shortcomings and my inability to connect with my true self, and see how that was a major factor in all that happened, but also see other things that contributed to it, and then be philosophical about the whole scenario. Okay.
So when you say that it was a major factor in contributing, like not being true to yourself was a major factor to contributing to the situation, do you mean that in allowing it to continue, or?
Yeah, and I found myself doing things that weren't honorable, doing things that weren't useful.
Right.
And I think what was happening is that I was flailing, trying to find a way out, trying to find a way back to a place where I could be true to myself. My partner now and I, who've been together for 38 years.
Wow.
Yay.
Yeah.
We're both kind of outsiders. I mean, he's much younger than I am. And who thought that at the beginning there would be a true connection between people of different ages, but he's extremely old for his age, and I'm extremely childlike. So, and I think what happened over the years in which I was formally married and went through changes, etc., was that when I went through my difficulties in my late teens, etc., I got stuck there. I really got stuck there. I didn't grow in many, many ways. So my age was still back there in many ways. It wasn't, I hadn't moved forward.
Okay.
And so that I connected with someone who, in many ways, is around the same age as I am, which is kind of bizarre.
That's an interesting way to look at it.
Yeah. I mean, quite often people have looked at us, even over the 38 years, and say, oh yeah, you're about 5 years older than he is, aren't you? And I go, yeah, around that.
Yeah, pretty close.
But the thing is that he accepts me for who I am. He understands my wavering. He has his own things that he's been through and so on. But we accept and care for each other through all those ups and downs. And I guess I'm an outlier. I'm someone who doesn't fit into a norm, I guess. And that's okay.
Yeah.
For a long time, I didn't think that was okay.
Okay.
But I do now.
So when did that change for you? Where you shift to saying that I'm comfortable in my own skin and I don't fit in and I'm okay with that?
Well, I guess when I began to work as a professional actor, that really helped me look at myself as someone who had a legitimate place to be.
Okay.
That I was doing what I was always meant to do, even though it wasn't always easy. A lot of, it's very precarious life as an actor.
Right.
And I had trouble sometimes socially trying to figure out how to fit into a community of actors or into a working situation with other people.
Okay.
But I still knew that I was being true to myself in terms of doing what I was always meant to do. So that was a good thing.
And how did you know that? Like,
well, in myself, I always knew.
Okay.
I always know when I've given a good performance and when I haven't given a good performance.
Right.
I have my own standards for myself, but I also know that I'm good at it.
Okay.
I mean, that sounds egotistical, but it's just like Naomi is really good at dealing with animals and dealing with nature and being true to herself in that way, and helping other people and understanding and giving of herself to other people. That's what I feel like when I'm acting, that I am giving the truth of the world, sharing it with other people,
right,
or when I'm doing a good job as an actor.
Okay.
Yeah.
I love that. I love the way that you describe that, because it's more than just the feeling of like, yeah, I really enjoy this and I'm really thriving, but it's also like, and I'm in service in doing this. That's
what it is. And I think a lot of people don't understand that about actors. They think actors are egotistical or selfish or just want limelight, and that's actually in many ways the opposite of what actors want. They just want to be able to tell the truth about the world and share it with other people, and the truth about what it is to be human, right?
Yeah. Interesting. I think that's such an apt way to describe it. So thank you. I love that. So going back to when you were talking about in your first marriage and you were not living true to you, what was sort of the crux that made you say, I can't do this anymore?
Okay.
And you had to shift. You don't give specific details. I don't mean like you can share as much as you're comfortable with. I mean more. No, like was it a case where you really felt you were at kind of a rock bottom point, or it was just untenable the way you were going on?
I mean, why did I leave my marriage? Is that why did I move out of that situation?
Yeah. What was it that actually prompted you to take action? Because this is something I always find really fascinating. I feel like a lot of people go through life sort of again, just living up to other people's expectations. And I always think, well, what is the impetus for actual change? Do you have to hit sort of rock bottom?
Well, in that way, I certainly wasn't living up to anybody else's expectations.
Okay.
But, and I didn't actually leave that town where I lived until like a year and a half after I had been separated, etc.
Okay.
And by that time I had met this partner and felt safe enough and strong enough and could do it together to move to Toronto. So because that way we could both, he as a chef and I as an actor or whatever was going to happen with that,
Mm-hmm.
could explore and become what I needed to become.
Okay.
And it was difficult because for the first year my son wasn't with me, but then after that he moved to Toronto with me and has been with me ever since.
Right.
Well, not with me,
Yeah.
not now, but that was really, it was a very, very difficult time. So that's a situation whereby you don't want to be selfish with being true to yourself, and it can be painful, but eventually things work out so that can be accomplished, so that you can mend the hurt or make sense of what happened. So.
Yeah, I think that brings up, like, that's such an excellent segue to, I think the point there, it's that very difficult balance of your own, your own needs, but not in a selfish way.
Yes.
Realizing that you have all these relationships around you and you don't want to damage them and burn the house down.
Yes.
You're not. How do we make this transformation, and how do we live in a way that's expressing ourselves, but that's also respecting the others in our relationships, whether that be partners or children or family or friends.
Yeah.
So that's definitely very challenging, but it sounds like you were able to eventually navigate all of that.
Yeah, difficult, especially, when you move away and come to Toronto, and we basically had nothing.
You're right.
And
starting
Starting over completely. So
Yeah.
that it was a big challenge financially, and otherwise I worked at other jobs.
Yeah.
Was sort of an office manager, which was hilarious. I did a lot of camping. I did a lot of things, which brought in money and allowed me to take classes and do things and eventually build myself to a point where I was actually doing the things that I wanted. But it took about 10 years. Probably.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Yeah, it was a long time. But, there were certainly moments of joy along the way, being part of the learning.
Yeah, absolutely.
And making friends too. So that was great. So.
And I think that also brings up another important point that, which is something I like to explore is, I feel when we are able to kind of express ourselves in an authentic way, we show other people how to do the same thing. And, you're sort of leading by your example, and especially for your son, because what age was he at this time?
He was 9.5 when his dad and I broke up.
Okay. So just kind of like preteen, and then, so
he was amazing.
Oh, wow.
He just sort of sat down. I'm sorry. I didn't
No, it's okay.
He sat down with us and said, okay, as long as you're both happy, you're happy and you're happy, and we can figure out how I can spend that time with both of you, then everything is okay.
Wow.
So, Michael, my son.
Wow.
He's still the same person.
Yes,
right? He's
absolutely.
Still, interesting how that was calming to both his dad and I.
Yeah, absolutely.
And he was healing us, even though it was really difficult for him.
Yeah.
But, he's always known he's been well loved and has been well looked after by both of
you.
So,
yeah. And I think that's critically important. But also, I think for him to see this example of his mom saying, this isn't working for me. This isn't a healthy situation. And I'm going to do something totally different. I'm going to consider your needs in this as well, which is, of course, extremely important.
Yeah.
But that's a really powerful example to him, especially coming in, to his kind of teenage years, to see like this strong, empowered mother forging her own path.
I ever thought of myself as that, but
that's brave. That's really brave.
Or crazy.
Aren't they part of the same thing?
Sometimes, yes. Yeah.
I love that though.
Yeah.
Do you feel that example of sort of rowing your own boat have you seen the ripple effect in your circle with others? Like, do you think other people have been inspired by your ability to be true to yourself as you have
When you say other people, you mean people in my
family, friends,
I never thought about it.
Okay.
I mean, I have made certain friends in certain areas. I mean, I have one friend in Toronto whom I've known for 35 years now, and I met her when I was working as the office manager that I was talking about. And she's not an actor, but she's a true friend that I feel very close to, who has me from that time and understands what my process was, etc., and has supported me. So I appreciate that. And I've supported her through the things that she's been through. So yeah, and she's kind of an outlier too.
Right.
So we understand that about each other. So yeah, I guess in a way, I mean, my poor son now has been separated. So I'm like, oh my God, what did I do? Like, did I, in some way, I don't think it really in the long run has anything to do with it.
Right.
But hopefully the way he handles it is humane and kind and as positive as it can be. And I think he's certainly attempting to do that.
Well, and I think that's a really powerful example of doing something in a non-traditional way, because, I think for myself, like, I split up with my ex-husband 8.5 years ago now. And at the time, we were very conscious of, we're stuck together for the rest of our lives because we have a daughter. Right. And so wanting to not engage in what society kind of typically expects with split up, which is, like drop down fighting. Yeah. And so we also were split up in what I consider a very humane way. And of course, that doesn't mean it wasn't painful.
No, I remember you from that time, Naomi. Yeah. You were extremely, affected by it.
Absolutely. It was heartbreaking.
Absolutely.
But I still feel like, so for you, the way your first marriage ended, I think that's really healthy modeling for Michael, that while he's going through a similar experience, he can draw on that experience from childhood and think, this is how I felt as a child going through this, and how do I want to support my children so that they also have a similar experience and not this terrifying, oh my gosh, I have to choose between mom and dad, and this is so stressful, and my whole world has been turned upside down.
Yeah, I mean, I don't wish that situation on anybody. God knows that's not necessary. Not everybody has to go through that in order to be true to themselves.
Yeah,
hopefully not.
Absolutely.
If you're lucky enough to have a situation whereby there isn't a struggle, then that's fabulous.
Yeah,
I wish that for everybody.
Absolutely. And I think for sure it doesn't mean that, you're finding yourself and that means you're going to trash your marriage and all of your friends and family relationships.
Yeah.
No, it's and in many cases, I think we're fortunate enough to have partners who can support us through that transformation. Yeah. And at the end of the day, you still have a strong connection. Yeah, it doesn't mean, and I certainly have experienced that with friendships where there, when I've made changes, I've thought, ooh, this could be the end of this connection. And I've been pleasantly surprised by the friends' willingness to adapt to and be open to this different expression of who I truly am. Right. Because I mean, I don't feel like it's one day you come out and it's like, ta-da, here's me. Not at all. It's this constant evolution. And I think we can accept that with all constantly evolving. But in some cases, the relationship is not going to survive, but in many, many cases, it certainly does.
Yes. And more power to the people that are strong enough to be able to do that. Yeah. Like I totally admire that.
Yeah, so, I agree. Yeah, I agree. I also believe that friendships relationships in general, they have an expiry date. The expiry date might be 50 years from now. The expiry date might be 5.
Yeah. Well, it depends on the people involved.
Absolutely.
For sure.
Yeah. So that's a totally different conversation.
Yes.
So tell me, just bringing it more current, how do you feel that this past year with COVID-19 and what that has brought to us socially, has that changed your ability to live authentically, or has it made you sort of double down and recommit to being really fully you?
Um, okay. It's been a difficult year for everyone with COVID in terms of being isolated and being with your partner, if you have a partner,
Mhm.
etc., or a child, if you're alone with your child. So that there are challenges to everyone to behave as your best self,
Right.
for sure. In my situation, I have a partner who now has an autoimmune disorder, and that's been a challenge in itself to try and certainly him first a lot of time. Not that he's expecting that necessarily, but that's the way life works best, so that I can see what's happening with him and bring everything that I have to understanding and being there for him. So that's been hard.
Okay.
But you know, he all knows that I have to be true to myself. So he totally encourages me to do the painting I've been doing, to write the poetry that I've been writing, to read what I read, to watch what I watch, and so that's worked well in terms of his understanding of what my situation is and my understanding of what his situation is.
Okay.
And it's difficult with the health issue, because it's, you know, it's there every day.
Yeah.
It changes our sleep patterns. It changes. That's why we're here at noon today instead of earlier, because quite often our sleep is very interrupted,
Right.
et cetera, et cetera. So,
And that's, yeah, I mean, and that's something like, that's a change upon a change with, so you have, you know, a diagnosis and change to his health concurrently with this enormous change that's been brought about.
And being, you know, not being able to see my kids.
Yeah.
And, you know, that my daughter and other grandson live in Mexico. So what's happening with them, and worrying about what they're going through.
Right.
It's, yeah, there's a lot of uncertainty.
Yeah.
But then a lot of certainty about who we love,
Right.
why we love them,
Yes.
how it's going to contain to go forward from here.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely. Yeah. And I think that's the gift of this time, is to help us really feel quite certain about what our priorities are.
Yeah.
I know that's been my experience, to say, you know, yes, of course I miss, you know, things like traveling and eating at a restaurant or whatever.
Yeah.
But what do I really miss? I really miss hugging and kissing my friends.
Exactly.
And family.
Yeah.
You know, that's it. It's that impersonal contact. And but yeah, I mean, it's such a complicated and layered issue with COVID. It's brought up so many things, but I want to hear more about the poetry and painting. I love that creative self-expression.
I can show you later.
Okay.
My granddaughter, who's 19, is in second year at U of T, and she's in a poetry course, and so she's been writing quite a lot. She sends me what she has written. She just sent off things to 4 different publication companies to see if they're going to publish. And she's been advised by her teachers at U of T, so that's really great. So I just decided that I would join the poetry circle here, which our friend Tim runs as part of the library program. And I love poetry. I will see what other people are doing. I'll try writing some myself. So I've written about 5 or 6 now, and that's been good for me, because a lot of what I'm concerned about and thinking about during COVID is coming out
through poetry.
I love that. Which is great. And then you can hear other people's thoughts and look at traditional poetry that relates to these issues as well. So that's good. And I've done lots of painting. I mean, I used to be an art teacher back in the dark ages. And so I love to paint, and been trying to recapture my skills that are somewhat rusty, shall we say.
Oh, I'm very anxious to see what you've produced, and if you would like to share poetry, I'd love to hear it.
Absolutely, I can send them to you.
Wonderful. And I love that that you have adjusted your creative expression to different mediums because of what we're going through.
Well, I can't exist without them.
Yeah.
Let's put it that way. And I think that's what you're talking about.
Absolutely.
Yeah. We can't exist without touching on those things which are truly ourselves.
Yeah.
So those are the things currently.
Yeah, I love that. Kudos to you, Colleen.
Thank you.
That's wonderful. So I don't have any more questions to ask you. Do you have any questions that you'd like to ask me?
I hadn't thought about that. Well, I'm really pleased to see that, that you that the center of your life is about nature
Mhm.
and natural creatures, and then those are the things that you are focusing on, as well as sharing the love of those things with others and using that knowledge to help other people understand their
Right.
own world. And I, you know, as you said to me, kudos. I think that's a very, admirable thing. I couldn't do it. We all have things which, we are focused on and we
Right.
can do,
Yeah.
and then the others that we admire in other people but are incapable of. But I think it's fantastic that you do what you do.
Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, it's interesting for me. I've really realized that during the lockdown, especially last spring, because when we were on sort of a really hard lockdown, and I had my mom and stepfather living with us, and it was just so important to me to spend time every day in nature. It was so grounding, and it was so good for my mental health. And I mean, I've always loved the natural world and animals, and it really has been reinforced for me this year, which has been nice. And so I feel I'm very lucky too that I live out in the country, and it's easy for me to access nature and feel very connected to the natural world. So it's a true gift.
It certainly is. Yeah.
All right. Well, any other final thoughts or comments before we?
Well, it's very kind of you to ask me my thoughts. I appreciate it. And the more we connect in different ways through this time, the better.
Absolutely, absolutely. And no, I think that it's just so important to have these conversations. And I know so many people have been talking about COVID and this past year, and it's a write-off, or I've been so bored, and I think, there's so much to consider, and there's like and I know it's uncomfortable because we're in a space that's very different from what we're used to, but uncomfortable doesn't mean it has to be a year we trash or throw away. There's
value to it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, there are really a lot of bad things, but there are some good things too.
Yeah.
And I'm glad to try and find the good things as you are.
Exactly. That is worth sharing and discussing, in my opinion.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, thank you, Colleen. I very much appreciate